This week, Nathan Case is with us to discuss getting rid of CISOs. Then Theresa Lanowitz from AT&T Cybersecurity joins us to talk about securing the edge ecosystem. Finally, in the enterprise security news, OneTrust raises $150 million. Netcraft is a security vendor now. More healthy funding. Thales picks up Imperva for $3.6 billion. Breached orgs unwilling to increase security spending. The death of InfoSec Twitter. SEC finalizes new cybersecurity rule. Placing bets on the Las Vegas Sphere getting hacked during DEF CON even. Backdoors and law enforcement radio gear. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
The cybersecurity landscape is full of single solution providers, making it easy for unexpected cyber threats to sneak through the cracks. That's why Fortra is creating a stronger, simpler strategy for protection, one that increases your security maturity while decreasing the operational burden that comes with it. This is all possible thanks to Fortra's best-in-class portfolio and deep bench of expert problem solvers. Fortra's integrated, scalable solutions help customers face their toughest challenges with confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra, Fortra. Do the words free time or relaxation sound foreign to you? Perhaps you've been stuck in the office too long, battling cyber threats or worrying about the next strain of ransomware. Let Sophos help provide peace of mind 24/7, 365 with cybersecurity delivered as a service. Because we want you to get back to your weekends, family dinners, and everything in between. And you'll get there with Sophos. Visit securityweekly.com/Sophos to learn more. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Intern Day. This is episode 325, recorded on Thursday, July 27th, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria. I'm not sweating, I'm glistening. And joining me today is the Czar of Zero Trust, the Captain of Content, Katie Teitler. How you doing, Katie?
I'm well. Happy, what's today? The 27th of July. It's almost August.
Happy Intern Day.
Happy Intern Day. Man, I wish I had an intern today.
Oh yeah, busy day?
That would be really helpful. We're a little bit under a time crunch here for a bunch of stuff. So, God, I would appreciate the heck out of that intern.
I could always use an intern. I've always got extra stuff going on that I could toss over to somebody. Also joining us is the Baron of Bloodhound, the Pirate King of PowerShell, PSW's new co-host maybe, or just a special guest, Sean Metcalf. How you doing, Sean?
Doing good, Adrian. Adrian's mentioning the fact that I was a guest on Paul Security Weekly last night, so I had to let him know that I was cheating on ESW yesterday. But yeah, no, I'm here at ESW. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. I hope that Intern Day means that you get an intern, but apparently not. That has not happened for me yet, at least. Good to be back from vacation and be here with y'all. So, hi.
You are a very different shade from what you were just a couple months ago, I'm pretty sure. You are vacationing correctly, sir.
Thank you. Florida for the win and the hot sun there, although I think the rest of the country is dealing with hot sun right now anyway. So,
right.
Yeah, about the heat. It's too much.
It is a lot. It is a lot. It's like 100 degrees down in Florida right now, at least.
Yeah, it's always crazy when it's like 92 degrees, but the real feel is like 105. I'm like, what is this, Vegas? It's not Vegas yet. I'll be there in a couple weeks, but it's not time yet.
I heard the water is over 100 degrees in some places. The water temperature.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I read that too. It's insane. Like, why? Why would you want? I mean, I can take a shower and it's really, really hot, but that's not refreshing necessarily. Yeah, even in Massachusetts, the real feel today is 100. So guess who's not going outside very much?
Yeah, I am inside. I just got back from the gym, and And yeah, I've just stopped sweating, so I'm not going to go. I'm going to chill out on this podcast for a little bit, and we're going to get into some interesting, spicy stuff today. We got a lot of good interviews and news topics to cover.
Adrian,
intern, aka her cat, is staying indoors.
Gus, the intern.
Right.
I don't think Gus is very useful as an intern, though. Just guessing, Katie.
Well, he's not present at the moment, so he's definitely not doing anything useful.
Yeah. All right, let's get going here. Quick announcement. Security Weekly listeners, InfoSec World 2023 is heading back to, guess where? Orlando, Florida. Join the but it'll be cooler by September. Maybe. We'll see. Join the InfoSec community at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort, September 23rd through 28th, 2023. Experience world-class learning and networking through enlightening keynotes, informative panel discussions, interactive breakout sessions, hands-on workshops and summits, and more. And I've been to this event, and I've been to that venue, and they do have AC inside. In case you're worried about that. As a Security Weekly community member, you're able to receive 20% off your InfoSec World 2023 tickets using code ISW23-SecWeek20. Register today at securityweekly.com/InfoSec World 2023. All right, today's topic is, and I am having fun with it a little bit. We're not, don't take this entirely seriously, but today's topic is firing your CISO. We're excited to have Nathan Case with us today. Nate's background is in incident response and operational security. He's very at home pushing the boundaries of threat detection and response. Welcome to the show, Nate.
Hey, it's great to be here.
All right, and if you want to go beat up Nate for this topic, his address is...
Yeah, very funny. I think it's a great thing to start with, though. I mean, it's as you put it, it's a very spicy opener. Maybe we should get into like what that actually means, maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, firing your CISO, isn't that what a lot of companies do anyway as a scapegoat?
Right. That is the end point, yes. I think we can look at the longevity of most CISOs. What is the average currently? Is it something like 2 years?
18 months is what I heard, and I think that was trending upward at 18 months from what I heard. And the trouble is not only the average tenure of the CISO, but the average gap in between, because you can't just hire a new CISO overnight. Like that process takes at least 6 months and sometimes a year or more in some cases, just a talent search and then negotiation and all that stuff. It's not easy.
No intern CISO on intern day?
Maybe a VCISO.
There you go.
That's another topic.
Yeah, it is a different topic. But yeah, let's just lay some foundation here. You know, I think everybody would agree that our first time out, we didn't necessarily do security correctly. You know, it's still a very new field. You know, I don't think CISO was even, you know, a common term that people would recognize until, well, depending on who we're talking to, you know, maybe, you know, 2 decades ago, you know, I remember starting to see the term, and, you know, you started seeing companies with CISOs, but, you know, a lot of times they were under the director of IT or something like that. They weren't very high up in the org. And yeah, it's been a bit of a rocky path trying to figure out, you know, how do you insert security leadership into an organization in a functional way? How do you build out those teams? How do those teams work with the rest of the business to achieve, you know, reduction of risk? You know, even talking about risk, like what should those goals be? So I think that's kind of lays the foundation for. Sure, of course, we're going to talk about the role of the CISO and whether or not we're doing that correctly, right? And that's kind of the topic for today, right, Nate?
That is the goal. As spicy as you can open it with, let's fire the CISO. I think the real forward here is, what is the CISO and what's the right place for a CISO? What should that CISO be doing? Do we use them correctly today or not?
Right, and I think we see them used. I mean, CISO is a very different role. Like, I have a bunch of friends who are CISOs at security vendors, or even just normal vendors, and that's a very different role. Where you're partially part of the sales team, you're partially part of the product team. Maybe you're responsible for product security, for evangelism, and then for just plain old IT security, right? So you end up with all these different roles, and you get to juggle between them. Whereas in a more traditional setting, just defending your average company, it's mainly that. It could be mainly that IT security role, but then there's the CISO with the I and the CISO without the I, and different responsibility sets there as well. So already we've got many different ideas of security. Some of them are actual executives. Some of them are several levels below that executive tier, and have different levels of like you could have a CISO with zero budget and zero purchase authority, or someone with a multi-million-dollar budget, right? So already it's all over the place, right?
How do we balance that? What is the actual role? What is the thought that we're looking for here? And if I may, I think the concept here is, if we're going to have a company and we're going to do security, we should all be doing security. Who is the top person responsible for that security? Is there one person responsible for that security? Is it something that we should all be part of, or is there a single individual that should get blamed when there's a breach?
Right. And I think we should start diving into some of those questions. So, and I'm strongly opinionated on this, that I don't think a security team or a CISO can succeed without some of that responsibility existing with asset owners or people who own portions of the business and things like that. The security team can never be an expert on anything. You're never going to have enough security staff to find every issue, and tell everybody to fix those issues in enough time. But also, I think, ultimately, it's probably, the end answer to all this is it's going to have to be a process, because, depending on the organization and their needs and their wants, there isn't one model for a CISO or a security team that's going to work for everybody, or even a lot of people.
Well, I think I would double click on the statement of, there aren't enough people. There aren't. I mean, if we're really honest about, what that looks like, does one team of, I was talking to a friend, last week, and she was telling me how she was a 2-person incident response team on a multinational manufacturing company. And when you look
with
at
hopefully
that
someone on retainer, right?
Yeah, but no, there were no retainers, there were no consultants. It was really just her and her friend. And I mean, I get it, totally, it's one of those things. Budget is budget, but at the same time, we start rolling that up, and we roll that up under the CISO, and we look at a CISO and we say, okay, so if the company really does care about security, then what is the budget appropriate to that? I think as we look at a lot of the layoffs that we were somewhat joking about originally, CISOs are something that gets let go. Why? I think it really comes down to the concept that we need to change the way we think about security. Is it something that we just try to push off to the side and make one small group of people handle? Or is it something that we all need to go ahead and step up and kind of embrace? Kind of like, well, honestly, like we were talking about in the original interview between you and I. Is security something that one person in a company is responsible for? Or is it something we should be building a culture for? And I think there's plenty of people out there jumping up and down and screaming about building a security culture. But at the same time, how do we do that? What does that really look like? As we drill into security culture, do you have your developers doing security? Have you actually enabled them as a CISO? And in many cases, a lot of the places that I've been historically, I've seen a lot of people try to push that security culture into developers and really miss on some of that security awareness or security, I would call it security championing, similar to the OWASP project that just got released a couple of days ago.
Right. Yeah. So, one thing, I that really changed my thinking on this. There's a paper called, let me get it correct. It's Better Testing Worse Quality by Elizabeth Hendrickson. And she published it in 2001, and she's in the quality assurance field, software quality assurance. And what's interesting is I think she found something similar to what we're finding now. Obviously quality assurance is a little bit older than security, but not a huge amount, was that by having a QA team, it sent the signal that you don't need to developers, that you don't need to worry about security. There's now a quality team, that there's somebody with that in their title that is now responsible for that. So they saw quality of code go down dramatically after introducing the QA team. People were just throwing stuff over the wall. They weren't doing as much testing, functional testing or regression testing, any kind of testing, building tests for their code. And she found to fix it, two key things she had to do is restrict, create an artificial bottleneck of the number of QA resources there are, and also push responsibility back onto the developers for shipping good quality functional code over to QA. By restricting that and shifting responsibility back, now it's on them. They're incentivized to get their code through in as few passes as possible. They don't want to see that bump back to them. But then you have to make an allotment for that. If you've got your developers 110% utilized, you can't then tell them, okay, now you're also responsible for security, and you can't afford to have this bouncing back without also giving them the extra headroom to do that, right?
What I would argue is, I would put in there, not argue, I suppose. I would completely agree with you in that that's a totally 100% agree with you on that thought. But how do we get that developer to have that ability? Do we just hand them code and tell them to write secure code? It's not going to happen. We have to push the tools that are security tools now left as far as we can back to that developer, so that as the developer is pounding away on the keyboard, they begin to see, hey, I can't use this library. It needs to be updated, or I need to do this, or that to make my code a little bit more secure. I mean, we talk about SSRF. There was a release, what was it, yesterday, on one of the wiki companies, and in an effort not to call them out. But because of this, what happened? Why did the remote code execution vulnerability that's currently released get into the wild? Well, obviously somebody made a mistake, but wouldn't that have been caught in in a code review? Well, arguably no, right? I mean, if, again, back to your point, if we have everybody writing code as quickly as possible and we're trying to get it left to right, it becomes exceptionally hard to do that. I think it's interesting in that it's almost the inverse of the Phoenix Project, but you start looking at how you need to, in your words, trim the resource, or how did you put it? Constrain the resources, I believe, so that you can force security to be a thing, as opposed to something that they have to think about later because it's somebody else's problem. And I think it exemplifies the way that we've been doing security for the last 20 years. You start looking at security being tacked onto the end of a project or gating a project at any of the Fortune 10s you want to point at. We need to architect for security at the very beginning, so that as the developer begins to write code, as they begin to use the tools that they use, they understand what we're actually asking for, and then we as security people are asking for, and then are able to actually deliver that at the end, as opposed to find out 2 weeks before the project's supposed to go live that, oh yeah, by the way, you have to use port 443.
So specifically around developer security, Microsoft implemented the widely taunted or touted, depending on your perspective, trustworthy computing a number of years ago. Do you feel like that's something that can point to, hey, if you have developers focus on security, things get better? Or do you think that was more of like a point in time and we have to do more and better now? And I'm going to throw this out as a buzzword bingo question. And will developers using AI make this better?
Oh, will developers using AI make
Damn it, Sean.
Developers using AI will always make everything better. What the hell? Obviously. Yeah, that's a whole different security ball of wax to start unpacking. I would tell you that in my experience that developers and teams will write more secure code given better tools and given better observability and understanding. So in many cases, if you give somebody a tool and say, I need you to go do a thing, like let's take it totally outside of IT. If I hand you my table saw and I tell you to go make me a chair and then walk away, how well will that go? Obviously, it's probably not going to go horribly well unless you've got a background in woodworking. But similarly, if I, as a security professional, hand you a developer a requirement, let's say take a NIST requirement or any of the other CMMC, take your pick, and say that we have to live up to this thing and then walk away. I don't know that it really gets any better. So I think part of this is giving somebody tools, but also then sitting down and helping people understand more completely, what does it mean when we say we want you to write secure code? And I don't know if there's a test for that.
Because you don't want fingers and blood everywhere, right?
Well, yeah, back to the analogy, fingers and blood suck. But when we get back to the AI and the things that we could do, sure, absolutely. There's definitely a place for a co-pilot or something to sit next to you and go, hey, that's a good idea or a bad idea. Now, as the security geek, there's portions of me that think about you transiting all of that data out to an open model somewhere in a public forum, and that's a bad idea. But how do we then implement that appropriately for a developer inside of a large company or even a small company so that they can have the things they need local to them actually building the code or writing the code to understand whether they wrote good code or bad code? Should we have synthetic tests that the developers get to see as they begin to write the things? Should those synthetic tests have actually been all the way back in the stories and the business requirements when the developers and the project manager and the product owner were talking about what they expected and wanted? And I think the answer is yes.
I think one of the challenges that we continue to see is the same sort of things over and over again. And this is definitely a trend in the industry. It's not just around code and development, it's systems, security, enterprise security, as we talk about it here on the podcast every week. We are still seeing the same things, buffer overflows, we're seeing cross-site scripting, the same sort of things over and over again. So if developers have a way to help them better identify that as they're writing code or through checkpoints along the way, do you think that's a process that can help? I mean, first of all, I can say if you give me a table saw and even give me directions on how to build something, it's not going to be a good thing at all. So I get your analogy. It won't work for me because I can't do that. But for good developers that write good code, maybe they don't need as much help, but certainly as people are writing code across an organization, or, you talk about, I'm going to bring up Microsoft again, they have hundreds of developers, if not more, that are collaborating on a code base like Windows or components of that code base. And then you have the interplay or interaction and dependency between the different components of that system. And that makes it very complex. Are we at the point where code is so complex that we have to have some sort of helper system there? Or do you feel like there's still processes that we can do along the way in order to identify and help make that code better?
So you brought up a really interesting point. Code complexity equals good or safe or secure code. So I was actually reading a blog a couple of days ago on what code complexity is and why we as developers, why we as security people, why we as geeks write complex code. And we're not talking about writing obviously bad complex code, but rather what we would maybe consider complex because we want to show off code. I think there's something to be said for writing code that the developer or any developer can actually understand as they read it, so that it is both efficient and understandable, as opposed to maybe we use the word elegant. Maybe it's elegant, but nobody could possibly ever understand the functions that you're using to get to the end point. Well, is that really good code or not? Is it more or less secure than the code that was relatively simple, but it was written in a simple / elegant way so that anybody can read it? And is that actually something that needs to get tagged to code in general? But I think then we get into a developer podcast, and that's probably not where we want to go. But to your point, sorry.
Go ahead and wrap up your point. Yeah, that's where I was going also. I was going to pull it back up a level or two.
Sorry. But as we get into security and we think about that, I think it comes down to a really good coder is someone who is able to sit and evaluate the code that they're writing, both for, is it secure? Is it rationally secure? Do I have the tools with me that I can do that with? Maybe we're looking at something like an automated pen test system at the end of your build that actually shows you whether or not you have something that is appropriate to the things that we expected it to be. That's where I get into synthetic testing that is part of development, as opposed to synthetic testing that is evaluating whole chunks of code or whole chunks of an application when it's been produced and put into production. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, so
feels like it.
So let's Sean?
Sorry, yeah, absolutely. Had to find my mute button.
By the way, I have that very t-shirt.
Oh, yeah.
Should have brought it.
So I mean, it is a good conversation because that is one of the bigger challenges, right? But not necessarily all orgs even have code that they're building, right? There's orgs out there that have minimal to no developers even, but still have security challenges. And, but certainly, it's been interesting. I think that is one of the big shifts we've seen where, we might have gone down some wrong paths early on where, I think it kind of started with the Rugged Manifesto, and now, Kelly Shortridge has a book out on chaos engineering and or chaos security engineering, and it's a very different approach to building stuff than we've done in the past. We've had so many shifts, and I'm not sure that the CISO role, how we build the security team, like all that's still catching up. And it's like the stuff we talk about on this show tends to be like emerging tech and trends and things like that. But I'm also IANS faculty, so on a weekly basis, I'll talk to companies that are running their very first vulnerability scan, and are not familiar with any of this stuff that we talk about on this podcast. And it's almost like taking a time machine back. So there's still a lot of companies out there that aren't even aware of how to engage with developers. They're doing it for the first time today. So going back up to the top here, how should we think about doing security leadership at an organization, and who should that CISO role, this was your question, sorry, Sean, but yeah, where should that leadership exist? I know my opinion is kind of that it shouldn't necessarily sit with the CISO. Like the CISO has responsibility with security, formal responsibility, but ultimately I think it's the whole company, right? Like all leadership should be pushing for security, just like they push for revenue, for privacy, for everything else that is like a company value, right? That's important to the whole company.
I would hope so. I mean, like to your point about not everybody has developers, or not every organization has developers. Well, what about the CFO and that CFO's downline? Would she have developers or not? Well, if we open that up, I've dealt with a lot of incidents from finance organizations, including Excel VB scripts in their Excel documents because they needed to go ahead and do stuff. Is that person a developer? Well, arguably, yes and no, right? I mean, they don't have a background, they don't have any training, but they're doing something that they saw on Stack Overflow and they're copy and pasting it into their Excel sheet, and off we go. So to your point, and dragging it to the very edge of reality and looking at it from kind of a nonsensical point of view and calling that person, let's just go ahead and embrace it and say this person is a developer, they're a financial developer. And if that's true, then realistically, to your point, and I completely agree with you, by the way, that the CISO probably is maybe we call it the spiritual top of the food chain here, the responsibility holder for security, but that responsibility doesn't sit just with that person. That responsibility is passed to every person in the company. So even the CFO needs to understand that there's some level of connection to the actions that their people take, that they take on a day-to-day basis, and that the things that she will be doing or that her people would be doing would then also have the impact on the security of the company. Should we have included that plugin in our Excel spreadsheet that had the books for the entire company in it? Well, no. And there's a whole discussion about that to be had. But I think that's where we get into the issue, because a lot of the security people that I've worked with in the past, and a lot of the companies that I've either advised or talked to in the past, will have a very small security team, and that security team is generally overwhelmed, and they need the ability to spread out and communicate and connect with a lot of other people. And I don't know how you feel about it yourself, but I know there are times when I've been horribly grumpy, and as a security person, especially after an incident, it can be easy to be a little bit grumpy. And I think what happens is we don't do a good job communicating, befriending, helping the other organizations we don't see as needed today. I think that's partly on us, and we need to it and say, look, we need to get better at doing that. We need to include everybody.
I think there's everything looks like a nail type of issue here also. Like, my opinion is, sure, a lot of this stuff is a shared responsibility. Security can help with things like business email compromise, but ultimately, I feel like business email compromise was always a lack of robust accounting processes. Like you should just have, and you can go back and you can look at accounting best practices. And a single email shouldn't be able to reroute a multi-million-dollar payment to a vendor without some kind of some kind of additional check there. That's I don't think the solution is necessarily NLP and analyzing emails for BEC. Like sure, that can help, but I think the ultimate fix is, should this bank account have changed from, Bank of America to, the something in the Seychelles or something like that, right?
I agree. I think as we get into what is automation and we get into what is security, a lot of it becomes making sure that people do things that people are good at. I think that goes back to one of the things that Steve Schmidt said a long time ago. We shouldn't be able to type things in the command line if we can automate it. And
exactly.
I tend to be very...
Yeah, Steve Schmidt, by the way, led the security group at AWS for a number of years. I think he's now... What's his role now?
I believe he's CISO at Amazon now, isn't
he? Yeah. I knew when things got shifted around there, but talking to him was always really interesting because he, at the scale of that company, he looked at things very differently. Like a lot of their goals for the security team was to have less and less access to systems every year, to reduce the amount of access they had to systems because they knew it was a liability. Every person that had access to underlying workloads and things like that at Amazon Web Services, that increased liability. So how can we do this job and remove the risk of somebody fat fingering something or, very human mistakes, right?
Yeah, so I was just actually having this conversation yesterday with a friend, and she asked me, well, how would you go ahead and set this up? My response was, nobody has access to production unless they have a ticket, and then they've signed in with their two-factor, and then they actually are going to do work that is associated with that ticket. We do that by assigning roles to things and then making sure that the resources are attached to those roles.
So access isn't persistent, right? It's just in time.
You don't have access to everything all the time. I don't want to have access to all the passwords. Never do. Yeah. Should your CISO have access to all your passwords?
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, and it's there's just a lot of these assumptions that we still have, and it's funny how many things just go back to the principle of least privilege, like one of the oldest ideas. Much older than the idea of having a security team or a security role in a business. Least privilege goes back to like the 70s, even formally. Yeah,
that even before we had IT, we had this idea.
Right. And it's and it's still it's challenging to change that thinking, and then it's challenging to actually apply it to the environment. Like I remember when microsegmentation first came out, and I was talking to one of the first vendors in that space. I asked the question, how is this not like going from 8 firewalls to 8,000 all of a sudden? The idea that you're going to have some kind of custom DMZ between every machine-to-machine relationship, and there just wasn't a great answer for it. Some of those companies are still around, so I assume they found some kind of answer to that. But then Zero Trust came in and kind of replaced some of that mentality, I guess. But yeah, just keeping up with the trends here, and somebody comes up with a better idea, and that's part of what we try and do with the show is highlight where those shifts are happening and where people should be looking, when people come up with a better answer to those questions. But yeah, certainly I think the staffing thing is a difficult one. So going back to CISOs again, I think one of the challenges here, just talking about products and vendors and microsegmentation and things like that. If your CISO cycling out every 18 months or even less, and then it takes another 6 to 12 months to find another one, a lot of organizations just end up with this kind of island of misfit projects, right? Like a lot of these projects don't get done before those CISOs leave, and the new one comes in, and they have a particular set of vendors they prefer to work with, or there's a particular pet project that they want to focus on. Like how do you smooth all that out when the role of security leadership is constantly changing or just so volatile?
Well, I don't know that there's a way to, really, right? I mean, we have to change the way we look at that role so that we can change the way that we're dealing with all of the other things that go along with it. If we unpack that and turn it into a question about how do we do projects appropriately, securely, regardless of who's being the leader right now, how do we, let's say we're a company in this position right now, wouldn't it be easier for us to take the reality that, we're probably handling security the wrong way? Wouldn't it be better if we re-ingested security into our architecture team? And that may be a really good point of view to do it. I've got a couple of friends over at Discover, and actually that's kind of the way they're thinking about doing it now, is to begin to roll security into that architecture lead or the architecture pyramid of the portion of the company, so that regardless of how cool Sean is, when he's an amazing CISO, it turns into this question about how do we actually go ahead and include security in each of the projects independent of that CISO. Is that?
Yeah. No, I think that's the area I wanted to kind of explore, and I think Sean has an angle on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're basically talking about is the CISO role and how it's kind of evolved over time. There was an idea of what it would be, and at certain companies there's an idea of what it could be or maybe what it should be. And so I love your approach of the CISO kind of being the spiritual leader, and I just kind of envision everyone getting around the fire and singing Kumbaya together, and the CISO go, you will do assessments of your environment, you will perform least privilege, you will write secure code, you will use MFA and things like that, and then people walk away and they're excited about it.
Yes.
That would be great. We're not there yet. I've certainly seen that the more successful companies when it comes to security are the ones where everyone is involved in security. The developers, those that manage systems, those look at it and go, yeah, something's not right here. Maybe we should figure this out. And one of the things that I've seen that's kind of a challenge are those companies that kind of just go about security kind of willy-nilly. There isn't really a plan, there isn't basically an approach, and there isn't really a strong CISO or a CISO that is helping moving things forward. And I think one of the challenges that we had in the industry is security always kind of says no, and business operations needs to advance and needs to be accounted for there. So with all this together, where do you see the CISO role as far as what it is today? And ideally, who do you think the CISO should report to? And are there situations where this reporting structure would or should vary?
So I'm going to do the whole consultant thing and say it depends. Wow. So let me start off with, and let me make sure I got the questions right. The questions in line here. We've got where should it report to? How should we do it so that it drives security as a culture? And what was the third one? Did I miss the third one?
It's basically the reporting structure and the relevance of it. What should a CISO actually be doing really to move us forward versus where we've been? So
I am very much of the opinion, and I would hope that you both agree with me, that a CISO is the person that is supposed to drive the thought, I'm going to say thought leadership, apologies, that is supposed to actually drive the belief of security, what is security for this company, into the company itself. And that is the root goal of what they're doing. Now, is that GRC? Is that detection? Is that incident response? Yes, it's all of those things, and it's different in each of those models. So if I, as a CISO, stand up and say, hey, we've got to be better about secrets management, then I, as a CISO, should also be prepared to deal with correcting the governance principles that we run the company by to correct the fact that we're not handling secrets correctly. And then Is that me personally? Probably not. It's me delegating to a GRC team. But it's not a statement that, hey, everybody, you have to do this, and if you're not doing this specific thing, you're not allowed to do, something else. These concepts should be the concepts of, hey, look, we have a business goal we have to meet. Okay, cool. Let me come up creatively with a way to help you meet that goal through GRC, in this case, if we're going to go through key management and key safety. But as we look at that, then how do I build out appropriate policies that allow my developers to get to a place where they need to and want to and intentionally try to keep aligned with that governance policy and regulations? And I think as we get to regulations, we start jumping into what does that structure look like? I totally, honestly, think that it's personality based. I think there's a good argument for having the CISO report directly to the CEO. If you have a company that is generally very, we'll call it leadership driven, maybe more militaristic, I think having that CISO report to the CEO gives you a certain level of peers discussing things and working together. Now, realistically, I don't have a problem with the CISO reporting to the CIO or the CTO, or the other way around and have the CTO report to the CISO. All of these things are okay because realistically, if you're doing technology correctly, you're doing it securely. So arguably, if everything is going the right way, why couldn't you just have the technology team entirely rolled into the security team? And why can't those two teams coexist? Well, I think they can. I think if we do this the right way and we build the right team and build the right trust, it's totally a possibility. We just have to, as leaders, as people who are doing it, make sure that we build that trust. And as we get into problems with awkward development or things that got missed in architectural in architectural design, how do we approach those security issues with our developer brothers and try to figure out how are we going to approach that security issue together, as opposed to just telling them no and they've got to go fix it.
That makes a lot of sense. So I've got a spicy follow-on question to that. Should a CISO be fired if there's a security incident?
Well, that's an interesting question. Do you feel like a security guard should be fired if somebody breaks into your house? Or should a police officer be fired if somebody breaks into the house? And my gut here is no. I think we've decided that it's okay to fire a CISO because that CISO has been responsible as the top of the pyramid for security. And I think that belies the concept that as we all as humans begin to look at security in a company, and a large company specifically, we feel like that CISO is the person that has taken responsibility for all of it. And 9 times out of 10, if we're all very honest, they may have responsibility, but they have no ability to change it. And that's kind of an issue. So if we kind of roll that back and take it apart, I personally believe that part of the issue that we have with leadership right now is that we don't allow our leaders to make mistakes. And we need to allow them to make mistakes and consequently go forward anyway. And there are times when, sure, everybody's going to get breached. It's not something that you can avoid. It will happen. Security in depth and a breach should only be 1 or 2 layers, and you shouldn't. All of these things are true, but eventually a really bad thing's going to happen and you're going to have to deal with it, whether that be an insider, outsider, take your pick. And when that day comes, removing your CISO from the equation because they were the person in charge at the time, unless they've made some gross negligent error, really just removes the investment that you've made in that individual in your company, for better or for worse. And 9 times out of 10, I would argue that it's probably for worse.
Yeah, it's almost like there's mental gymnastics around that, where we assume breach and every organization or company will get breached or has been breached or could get breached. But at the same time, if there is one, we're going to fire the person who has been trying to move the needle and make the environment more secure, or at least the person who is the biggest cheerleader of that, the spiritual leader, the kumbaya person behind that.
Well, I think as we get to it, I mean, like, how do you prove that security is working? Nothing happened. And that's always the issue, right? Like, you don't have a proof that says, hey, I'm doing good security, this thing happened. No, in fact, I'm doing good security, nothing happened.
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's so much other. There's some good chat in the good questions in the chat as well. Talking about organizations too small to even have security leadership. Which I think gets into in my experience, I've noticed a lot of places where if the entire executive team doesn't take security seriously, like if it's only the security leadership you ever hear talk about it, it's really difficult to be successful. So I think that kind of applies to smaller organizations as well, where you don't have any formal security leadership there, and a lot of things end up getting outsourced. You're kind of missing that spiritual position, that evangelist. I feel more comfortable calling it an evangelist, or I don't know, maybe there's a better term, but
advocate,
yeah, if somebody's
that whole section.
Advocate,
let's call it.
Yeah, advocate works. Yeah. But yeah. If otherwise, it just comes across as just one of these things you do for compliance, one of these things you have to do. Just boxes you have to check, just cost of doing business, and people don't take it as seriously. But yeah, sadly, I think we're about out of time. So, but before we let you go, Nate, I think you've got a talk coming up at Hacker Summer Camp, don't you? B-Sides, maybe?
Two of them. I'm going to be speaking at B-Sides Las Vegas, and I'm going to be speaking at Biohacking Village. Also, next week, if anybody's into it and happens to be in San Francisco, I'm doing a workshop at Dash for intro incident response. And literally, it's written so that everybody can come and do it, even if you have absolutely no background in incident response or technology. So lots of fun stuff coming up. We're going to do 2 tabletops at DEF CON. That should be a lot of fun. Both the Blue Team Village and the Biohacking Village got together this year and put together kind of a rolling tabletop for, I believe, Friday and Sunday.
Very cool. Very cool. So tabletops involving like hospital situations?
That would be telling. It is indeed hospital and
is it somewhat secret? Should I not?
It's a little bit secret. I don't want to give it away, but yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And those as well are set up so that you can be a geek, totally geek out and have a good time, but you can also be just somebody that wants to come and learn and get into it and decide whether security and stuff like that is for you.
Awesome. Yeah, I've worked with the Biohacking Village folks in the past. I don't know if there's the same folks still, but awesome people do a really great job with that village. So that sounds like a lot of fun. All right, Nate, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. It was a great conversation. We could possibly have a part 2 about it. There's still so much to discuss, but thanks for being here and having it with us.
I'm happy to be here. Hey, one more plug. I tell you what, Kim, one of our groups is actually running a Black Hat job fair. And if you happen to be looking for a gig or want to potentially hire people, that'd be a great place to stop by at Black Hat.
Good stuff. Yeah, thank you so much. And stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk edge computing with Theresa Lanowitz from AT&T Cybersecurity. Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Fortra helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automations. Take your engagements even further by pairing with our additional red teaming tools from Cobalt Strike and Outflank. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra Core Security. Are you constantly thinking about how to keep your enterprise as secure as possible? Get to know Chrome Enterprise, the trusted browser for security-conscious professionals like you. Its ease of use for IT and security teams and added access controls protect the remote, extended, and hybrid workforce, keeping your entire enterprise safe. Don't settle for a browser that compromises your organization. Visit securityweekly.com/Chrome Enterprise now to learn more and start protecting your enterprise like never before. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. You can now find us on Instagram. Follow us for highlight reels, giveaway announcements, and more at SEC Weekly, SEC Weekly. All right, this interview is sponsored by AT&T Cybersecurity. Theresa Lanowitz joins us today to talk about edge computing security insights. Theresa was an industry analyst at Gartner, where she championed AppSec and established the firm's AppSec quality ecosystem. She also created and launched the Gartner Application and Innovation Solutions Summit and has some fascinating and delightful career trivia. She worked on the C-17 cargo plane, was a product manager for Borland JBuilder. Remember Borland? And led strategic marketing for the Genie project. Welcome to the show, Theresa.
Hi, thanks very much. That intro is really fascinating. You're saying, remember Borland? That's very funny. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Turbo Pascal and I'm trying to remember some of the languages.
And Paradox,
Delphi, yes.
C++, yeah.
We had some Delphi at my first job. We had everything. We had a little bit of everything.
Pepperidge Farms remembers.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, let's I don't think the edge computing, well, at least in the stuff that I read, I don't think it gets as much coverage as maybe cloud and SaaS and certainly AI and things like that. So maybe, Theresa, where we start out is just laying some foundation for what that means when we talk about edge computing, especially in relation to public cloud, folks who still have on-prem resources, things like that. What do we mean when we say edge computing?
Yeah, and that's a really good place to start. So when you think of where we are as an industry, we're really poised on the precipice of a new era of computing. We've gone from mainframe to client server to web to mobile to cloud, and now we're looking at edge computing. And with edge computing, what you're looking at is you're saying, all right, there are new generations of networks out there, lower latency, higher bandwidth. The applications that are going to be running these edge computing use cases, they're largely changed. They're no longer those GUI, those graphical user interfaced sort of applications that we've been used to using over the past 40, 50 plus years inside of IT organizations. And it's really about delivering this idea of a digital first experience. And so when you use the term edge, as we were putting together this most recent 2023 AT&T Cybersecurity Insights report, we were interviewing people from around the world, and we asked questions about their edge use cases. And, the comments we got back, they said, well, this is what edge means to me, or this is what edge means to me. And if you ask 10 different people the definition of edge computing, you'll probably get 12 different answers. So for the purpose of the research that we did, and so for the purpose of this discussion, the characteristics of edge computing is it is software defined, either on-prem or in the cloud. It's also your workloads, your applications, your hosting. It's closer to where that data is being generated and consumed, because edge is all about data. And it's a distributed model of management, intelligence, and networks. And so having said that, people probably sitting there scratching their head saying, all right, give me a real world example. And in our report, we have a lot of use cases that are happening in a bunch of different vertical markets. But if you think about something that we have all encountered in our everyday lives, think about driving into a parking structure where you're looking for a parking space and you're greeted with that big digital scoreboard. It says, here we are on the first level. There are 2 spaces available. And you think to yourself, do I really want to drive through this parking structure looking for one of those 2 available spaces? It's kind of like that classic, how lucky do I feel today? Or you go up to the next level and the digital scoreboard says, oh, there are 50 spaces available on this floor. You say, this is great. I'm going to, try my luck here. I'll find a pretty good parking space with 50 available. So if you think about that use case, it is software-based. It's near real time. It's a digital experience for you, the customer. You didn't have to open an app and say, I'm going to the parking structure on the corner of 3rd and Johnson. It is that near real-time information that's being served up to you through that digital scoreboard that we encountered. And so when you think about it, it's controlled through sensors and cameras. When a car enters into a parking space, that number on the digital scoreboard decrements. When a car leaves a parking space, that number on the digital scoreboard increments. So that's a really, really basic overview of what we mean by edge computing for the purpose of this discussion, for the purpose of this report.
Now, if we could get the parking folks to integrate that with Google Maps, that would be really nice, because then you don't end up even driving to the place with 2 open spots. You drive to the space. Like you don't even have to drive up and see the number on the scoreboard, right?
So you're eliminating that middleman. You're eliminating that scoreboard. And if you think about it, that's sort of the next level of iteration on that type of technology, right? And from a business point of view, the owner of that parking garage can probably charge a little bit more for his patrons or her patrons to park in that garage because it's convenient. So you're not driving through a structure endlessly looking. You have a doctor's appointment. You have an appointment you have to get to in town.
They're saving
and so
time.
You can charge a little bit more.
Yeah, they're saving you time, right? That's a huge convenience. That's what nobody has enough of, right?
And that's one of the things that edge computing really brings us is these business outcomes. So as we look at this, we suddenly now start to see the line of business very much involved with what we're doing from a computing perspective, because they've really figured out, oh, this technology can really help me deliver a better business outcome to my customer, whether that customer is internal or external. It's really about driving those business outcomes.
So it sounds like edge computing and IoT are joined at the hip somewhat here.
Most definitely joined at the hip, right? I mean, we're seeing this expansion of endpoints. And if you think of an IoT device, an Internet of Things device, it is, in fact, an endpoint. And one of the things we found in the research that we just did is that 48% of our survey participants said, you know what, we're using today for our current endpoints, we're using those traditional types of things that you would expect. So laptops, desktops, tablets, phones. But then they said, you know what? 30% of them said in the next 3 to 5 years, our endpoints are going to change dramatically. We're going to have things such as robots, autonomous drones, autonomous vehicles, wearables for remote patient monitoring in a healthcare scenario. So these endpoints are diversifying, these endpoints are changing. And yeah, IoT and edge computing definitely joined at the hip because it is all about that data that you're generating and consuming.
Yeah, it was interesting. My personal trainer said he went to Whole Foods today and used the palm thing for the first time, where you check out just by putting your palm down. It's interesting because a lot of these use cases that you're talking about are, I'm not sure everybody's entirely comfortable with. You know, it's changing a lot of workflows, a lot of the way of how we do things, right? You know, maybe talk about some of these future use cases as well. You know, you're talking about currently, you know, what we think of. We think of phones, tablets, laptops, but as we stuff computers into everything, like what does that future look like?
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up the palm reading for gaining entry into some type of sensory controlled type of environment, or paying with your biometrics, that sort of thing, and that increases the risk, and you have to be able to figure out how you're going to secure that as the business is putting that out there. And if you look at the use cases that we uncovered in our 2023 AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report research, we surveyed 7 different vertical markets. So finance, healthcare, retail, manufacturing, energy and utilities, transportation, and U.S. state, local government, and higher education. And across the board between 2022 and 2023, every single vertical had new use cases from 2022 to 2023. So that's really encouraging, because it says that people are finding value and benefit in what they're doing. So some of the top use cases we've uncovered in 2023, smart building management. I think that's one that people have heard about for a long time. That was the top use case overall, and that was the top use case by U.S. state, local government, and higher education. Other use cases that we uncovered for manufacturing, for example, robots on the manufacturing floor. For transportation, fleet management, for financial services, near real-time fraud detection and prevention. So every industry out there is making use of edge computing, and we're all gaining and reaping the benefit of it through these better business outcomes that whoever we are the customers of, whether it's B2C or B2B, we're all gaining benefit from it.
So I think that's a good foundation. Let's shift the topic somewhat to security here, and how security, like I assume security's an enabler here. Like if we're going to convince different verticals, different businesses to do these things, they're going to have security concerns. Nobody wants their parking garage to get ransomware. The current trend in cybercrime is taking away availability, from a business's ability to do business, which is unfortunately very, very front and center and very effective in getting people's attention. So is that kind of how it's seen here as an enabler to make these use cases possible, because you can deliver them safely?
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic in 2020, when everybody went home to work suddenly, what that did for security is it moved security from being a technical problem that some really smart people in your organization dealt with on a daily basis to being a business requirement. So every business case now has a security component to it. We know security has reached the C-suite. The topic of security has reached the boardroom. And if you think about how budgets were allocated for security in the past, security had been primarily an afterthought. But what we found with this research that we just did is that security now has that proverbial seat at the table. And so we asked our survey participants, we said, of your overall edge computing budget, how much are you spending on security? How much are you spending on applications? How much are you spending on the network? And how much are you spending on planning? And this is really great, because what came back is it's more of a balanced investment across the board that we're seeing. So of an overall edge budget, they said we're spending 22% on security, we're spending 22% on applications, we're spending 23% on planning, and we're spending 30% on network. And that is really, really encouraging, because if you think about in the past, how much planning was ever really done for any of the computing use cases that we put out there? How much was really spent on applications? It was a developer kind of saying, yeah, this is ready to go to production. Let's throw it over the wall. We'll go. And how much was really spent on security? Security was always an afterthought. But because security is now a business requirement, it's that whole sort of collaborative ecosystem that you're working with inside of your organization. And so that was really, really great news to us, that people were spending, on average, 22% of their edge budget on security.
Thank you for that. It's interesting about the report and how all of this covers edge. Edge is this big thing that's evolving, as you mentioned, and I think that one of the things that's very interesting to me is in looking through the report, I find it interesting that patching is one of the higher ones listed for not worth deploying, relating to edge. And yet, in the past on this podcast, we've talked about issues with IoT firmware and how it can be vulnerable and have issues. Do you think that this is because there are other items that are deemed more important, such as firewalls, which is listed as something that is more important? Or is patching these devices, such as sensors, just not seen as a priority?
I think we're seeing a cultural shift in security. And you bring up such a good point, because one of the questions we asked our survey participants is we said, which security controls do you think have a very positive return on investment or a perceived positive impact, and which do not? And it came back overwhelmingly, and this is true in 2022 and in 2023. People came back and they said, you know what, patching is not something that we find a lot of value in. And you have to look at that data and you have to really scratch your head and say, why? And if you think about the way people in the past have really patched their systems, is it's been manual, it's been time consuming, it's been reactive. And where we are now is patching it's automated, it's fast, it's proactive, it's not reactive. And so I think we're seeing this cultural shift inside of security teams where they're looking at things sort of from a last iteration of computing perspective versus where we are now with edge computing. And if you look at an IoT device, for example, these IoT devices are coming, cameras, different types of sensors that you might have, that you might deploy. The manufacturer is very, very clear about you have to reset the factory set password. You can't go out there with sysadmin or 1234 as your password. And these IoT devices, they also know that it's important that they put out some type of patch on a fairly frequent basis. Now, not all of them are going to do that, but some of them are going to do that. And these aren't old, archaic types of devices that we have sitting out there on the network. They're new, they're modern. The manufacturers understand. But, as you said, in some cases, the sensors are just not patchable. Depends on how smart or how dumb that device is. In some cases, they're just not patchable. In some cases, they are. But this idea of patching as a negative connotation really is showing the movement, I think, of the culture of security, where we're looking at these old sort of manual ways of doing things versus the new and modern, more automated ways we can do things.
Thank you for that. The question I have that's in a kind of an obvious follow-up to that is, certainly it sounds like there are IoT components to edge, and yet edge is much bigger than that, right? So what are some of the key differences between what edge refers to, what IoT refers to, and where are some of the grayer areas where these kind of interact or overlap?
I think there's a lot of gray area, right? I mean, one of the things that we started off talking about was that edge and IoT are really joined at the hip, but you can have edge use cases without IoT specific types of devices. One of the big use cases we saw in our 2022 research was patient virtual meetings with doctors. And that is certainly not something that's reliant upon IoT, but it is edge. You have to have a fast enough network. You have to make sure that network is secure, that connection is secure, and so on. So while IoT and edge do seem inextricably linked, they're not necessarily always one is part of the other. So edge is really where that customer is, where you're generating and consuming that data. For the most part, people are saying, yeah, we're using a lot of IoT types of devices.
Okay. One of the things that I read in the report was, you mentioned there's a lot of different use cases around edge, and fleet management is one of the things that's highlighted. Certainly one of the most important security controls relates to ensuring access is only provided to those who require it. You use the example around the garage and the scoreboard, right? Adrian mentioned, hey, that would be great if that was integrated with Google Maps. Maybe that's not a concern, and that makes a great use case, and that way people can find the closest garage that has open spaces. But when we talk about things like fleet management, and it could be fleet management around trucks that are transporting things, it could be fleet management around ambulances that are transporting patients, that gets a little more sensitive. Certainly, one of the things that's really concerning around this type of data that could be available, and as it relates to edge, is access management controls. How integral are you hearing that these access management controls are to edge, and how are you seeing the implementation of these to a level that will help ensure that we're still following this principle? These privileges has been around forever, but we haven't seen it, really done well in almost any system yet.
Yeah, very much so. And access management is a big, big part of it. And one of the things we uncovered in our 2022 research is that zero trust was a big part. The zero trust framework was a big, big part of what organizations are doing on the edge. You talk about fleet tracking. You want to know where your fleet is at all times. So you put an internet connection on it. Now, what could possibly go wrong with that? Tons of things, right? So this idea of constantly knowing where your fleet is, being able to track, being able to provide zero trust identity access management to that item that is attached to the network, whatever that IoT, whatever that device might be, whether it is a car or a tractor out in the field, knowing where that tractor is at all times, knowing where your asset is at all times. So that's a really, really big component of it. And then you also have to be concerned about the different attacks that type of device could be vulnerable to. So, for example, one of the things we highlight in the Insights report, and this is one of my favorite pieces of data from 2023, is on page 30 of the report. We have a table that identifies the attacks that are perceived to be the biggest risk for organizations of 7 different verticals that we surveyed. And it was interesting because the top attack type that came back out of 8 different attack types was DDoS. And we looked at this data and we said, wow, this is really, really fascinating, because last year DDoS was last and ransomware was first. This year, they completely switched positions. DDoS is first, ransomware is last. And that kind of brings me back to this sort of cultural movement, this cultural evolution that we're witnessing in security right now. If you look at a DDoS attack, it is about attacking some device, taking it down for some period of time, disrupting business for some period of time. Ransomware is much more interactive. We have to click on something. It requires me as a user to actually click on something, download some type of malware, and then the ransomware actors act from there. But DDoS attack is less interactive. An IoT device can be attacked very, very easily. A cyber adversary can attack that IoT device, take it offline to disrupt the business, or maybe they're working in concert with a DDoS or with a ransomware gang, for example, gain access through that IoT device, potentially move laterally through the network, execute some sort of ransomware attack. So there's a whole lot to be concerned about in terms of securing those endpoints that you're putting onto your network.
So this raises a pretty good point about the attack surface, right? Because we have so much more. You raised the point about working from home, everybody going to work from home and having security raised from a technical issue to more of a business issue. When everybody started working at home, this became a critical business issue to keep people running smoothly while keeping them secure. Now, in our last interview, we were talking a little bit about the CISO and the CISO's responsibilities, and you've mentioned getting a seat at the table. But we also know that there are new regulations coming out. The SEC just put out some new requirements today or very recently. We're getting a lot more stringent about what is considered okay and what is not in security, with the CISO being the top of that pyramid, right? So the CISO has all of this so-called responsibility, but at a place like AT&T, for instance, there are hundreds of security people. There are thousands of workers who work for the company or who are contractors. So who is really responsible if something goes wrong in security? And is it even reasonable to expect that, especially in bigger organizations, security is positioned to be responsible or to take the blame or perceived blame when something happens?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that we have to be careful about conflating responsibility and accountability. Because in an organization of any size, everybody is responsible for security. You are responsible for not clicking on malicious links. And you are also responsible, if you do click on a malicious link, you need to inform somebody. You need to inform your CISO organization or your cybersecurity team or your IT team, whoever is responsible for the overall major accountability for security inside of your organization. And what this also really brings about is this idea that every company now has to be worried about security. And so what every organization wants to do, whether they are building airplanes, a financial services company, or selling flowers on Main Street, they want to innovate for their customers. They want to build better airplanes, better flying experiences. They want to deliver better financial services products. They want to give their customers more variety of flowers to choose from, for example. And so they want to be able to innovate for their customer. And so this is another bit of data that we uncovered in our AT&T Cybersecurity Insights report, is that looking for help from those external third-party trusted advisors, whether it's a consultancy, a global systems integrator, a managed security services provider, a telco to help you with network security, that sort of thing. It is incumbent upon the organization internally to communicate and collaborate with one another, but more and more organizations are looking for that third-party advisor. In fact, our data shows that 64% of organizations say they're looking for that trusted advisor, that help to guide them along the way when they are in the planning phase. And then once they move to full-scale implementation and production, that number increases from 64% to 71%. So 71% of the overall organizations that we surveyed said, we're bringing in this trusted third-party advisor. So you can have a really awesome CISO, but it never hurts to get some help from an external trusted advisor, especially as we start to go down these new paths of computing. And you bring up such a good point about the attack surface is doing nothing but expanding because nothing ever goes away. Now we have edge computing, but that's just additive to what we've already done. We still have to worry about mainframe, client server, mobile apps, web apps, and so on.
Thank you. Adrian, I think you had a question?
Yeah. So, one of the things I found interesting in this report, and, I've seen a lot of other places as well, where the perception of where people should be prioritizing security budget attention. They're focused. There's a ton of stuff in the news. There's a lot of distractions out there. So I wanted to dive a little bit into like how we get people to be more data driven, I guess. And there's a few examples in the report. Talking about the the DDoS example, where they're concerned about that, but then it's like low priority in terms of controls. And, people are less worried about edge use cases, I think you say in the report. And just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about how, like in the FBI's report, where they report, the IC3 report that comes out every year, BEC direct losses is like 6 times bigger than ransomware. But, we see ransomware in the news. Obviously ransomware stops the business, BEC doesn't. But the actual direct losses are so much higher. It seems like, we're still very emotional in what we choose to work on. Maybe we should be a little bit more scientific and data-driven.
Yeah, and that's a good point, being a little bit more scientific. And one of the things I like about our report is that table that I talked about. We break it down by different vertical markets, so by the 7 different vertical markets that we surveyed. And I always advise people, take that and use it as a discussion point. If you're in a financial services organization, are you focused on really business email compromise? That was their number one concern, was business email compromise from financial services. If you're in manufacturing, are you focused on DDoS? Do you understand what a DDoS attack can mean? Are you well prepared for that? And so I think using some of these reports, using some of this data that's out there is a really good way to start that conversation in your own organization. And it's so interesting you bring up these different cybersecurity controls, because we found out in our research that the more edge use cases that organizations have, the more comfortable, or the more, more of a requirement that they see is to bring on more cybersecurity controls. So in the beginning, they might say, oh, we're only going to bring on, 1 or 2 controls. But by the time they reach 4 or more edge use cases, they're saying, all of these cybersecurity controls are really, really important. And we also found, you were talking about patching earlier in terms of the kind of the negative connotation that patching had in the report. What we also found out is that people told us through data, they said, DDoS is something that we're not too concerned about. But then in the next page, in the very next question, they come back and they say, DDoS is the most important thing we have to worry about, because that is our biggest perceived threat risk. So it's really interesting, and I think that you look at this and there you can see through the data that cultural shift that is occurring within security organizations. And I totally agree. Making decisions based on data is a whole lot easier and a whole lot better versus making decisions based upon intuition.
What other surprising stuff came out, jumped out at you from the report? I mean, first of all, it's 1,400 respondents is a huge survey. Like it's impressive to get that number of respondents. But being the 12th year that you've done this, I know some stuff is just going to be incremental, more trends, but still every year, you have a few things jump out at you, right?
Yeah, you're right. And there are always those surprises. And we had, not to be too prescriptive, but it was 1,418 survey participants from around the world. So North America, Latin America, UK, Ireland, France, and Germany in EMEA, and then in APAC, Australia, Singapore, South Korea, and India. So it's a pretty good global representation. And so the things that jumped out, certainly, how much of an overall edge budget people are allocating to security. That was a really, really pleasant surprise. DDoS was one of those ones coming out as the top perceived risk. That was kind of a head scratcher, like, really? And when we got that data back, over the course of the past couple of months, we went back and we were reading some of our previous reports. And one of the technical, sort of more strategic writers on my team, she came back and she said, back in 2021, there was one sentence in our 2021 report that said, there is a perception that DDoS is going to be a concern in the next couple of years. And so, we had it there in writing from 2021, and we were still surprised by it that it came out on top in 2023. The other thing I think that we found interesting is that geographically, people have far more confidence in their security preparation, their security systems, than they did in 2022. So there was just this incremental increase in the confidence. So we ask people, how confident are you that you can withstand an attack and recover from an attack? And across the board in every geography, people said, yeah, we're far more confident than we were a year ago. And we also asked, how likely is it that that an attack is going to occur? And in 2022, it was on a scale of 1 to 5, it was up over 4.5. This year in 2023, it's down in the 3s. And the other thing that is really pleasantly surprising is that people are now equating a cybersecurity attack with a business impact. And I would say 3 to 5 years ago, you probably wouldn't necessarily see that correlation. And now there's that big correlation between, oh, if I have a cyber event, if I have some type of cyber event going on, I'm going to have a big business impact, whether that is reputational brand impact, whether that is stock impact, whether that is my customers no longer trust me. They're able to equate what those cyber incidents mean in terms of a business impact, which is really powerful, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad that people are looking at it that way, because a lot of times when breaches are discussed, or what the risk is, a lot of the time the answer or the response can be so what, like others have the same problem, why does this really matter? So that can be an issue. But one of the things that I think we've talked a lot about here is this is the Cybersecurity Insights report from AT&T and where things are today as far as edge goes. So how do you see edge continuing to evolve, especially in new areas and spaces? And I got to throw in my buzzword bingo here. How do you think AI may or could or will impact this space?
Yeah, so let's kind of take a look at where edge is evolving to. And our data clearly shows, Adrian said, let's make decisions based upon data. So our data clearly shows that organizations are continuing down this path of implementing edge use cases. They're seeing the big business benefit from it. The last year in 2022, our biggest use case that was implemented was in the manufacturing organizations for video-based quality inspection. And that's a really, really significant impact to the business. If you have video-based quality inspection on an assembly line, you're assembling widgets, and you have a variance for how these parts can go together, and suddenly that variance is off. You can then stop the assembly line and say, oh, we have to go back to the point of insertion of that defect. Think about how much money that actually can save a business in terms of product recalls or putting out products that may have to be scrapped when they do a visual inspection on them. So there's that big business outcome. And I think that what we're seeing is organizations are saying, you know what, we can innovate so much for our customers, whether it's in a B2B environment or a B2C environment, or whether that customer is internal or whether that customer is external, with a lot of what we're doing through edge computing. And then you bring in the AI component. And one of the things we have at AT&T is our AT&T Alien Labs. And that's our threat intelligence research team. And what they do is they work with the Open Threat Exchange, or OTX, and they look at roughly 21 million indicators of compromise a day coming from around the world. And what they do is they then go back and they enrich it with machine learning. So I think we're starting to see, and we've seen this for a while now, because our team has been doing this for a while, is that using machine learning to help you enrich what you're seeing from a threat perspective. Because there's always going to be a challenge with everything you're doing, and just getting ahead of those threats, understanding those threats, using machine learning to help you have more relevant findings, and have more relevant information about what's going on is only beneficial.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the other things, I saw in the report that I found interesting, and maybe not surprising, but and I suspect increased regulation will affect a lot of what we see here. Certainly we just saw the SEC, put out the final rule, and we're going to talk about that next in the news segment. Putting more requirements on businesses related to cybersecurity. But vulnerability management looked like it was the least implemented for endpoint and data protection. So I thought that was again it not surprising. I think IoT, like just asset discovery with IoT is very tough. A lot of the tooling out today will just tell you, it looks like a Linux device. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, most IoT devices run some flavor of Linux under the cover, but no ability to say, oh, it's from this manufacturer and it's 3 versions behind, and you can get the firmware updates over here. It seems like does it seem to you that we're still kind of a long way away from that, just due to the huge long tail of the number of manufacturers that make this stuff? Like we were talking about, Amano McGann, I think, unless they got acquired or something like that, was one of the big manufacturers of this kind of specialized parking technology that raises the arm and has the payment features and stuff like that, and probably also counts the cars. So is that still a ways out, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that every challenge is really an opportunity. I prefer to phrase it as an opportunity. So I think that this idea of understanding what's attached to your network, what it's doing, what version it's on, there's a tremendous opportunity out there, because what that says is that every organization needs to map their network appropriately, understand what is connected. And that goes back to who your users are as well, not just your endpoints, but you want to make sure you understand who and what is connected to your network. And there's a big opportunity out there for doing it in a little bit more refined and a little bit more relevant way. So I think that, it's an opportunity. We're at the beginning of this concept of edge computing. We're seeing all of these things make pretty fast advancements, pretty quickly. I was at a conference last week, a healthcare conference, and one of the use cases that we always talk about from the healthcare segment of the report is this idea of robots in a hospital. So think about delivering supplies to a nurse's station or disinfecting a room after a patient leaves, whether it be in a hospital or a doctor's exam room. And so these types of things are already happening. And, they're using robots in some pretty interesting ways. They're using them, we've all been into a hospital and we're trying to find the X-ray department. And they say, follow the blue line to the red line to the orange line. And you kind of, at least me, I'm very directionally deficient. And I really admit that, using robots to help people navigate a big area that they're unfamiliar with in a confined space, such as a hospital, where they're actually looking for information. We've seen some of those things before in shopping centers, and nobody was really asking for that. Nobody really said, hey, in a shopping area or in a mall, for example, give me a robot to help me figure out where I'm going. People are pretty aware of what they need to do there. But in a hospital, an unfamiliar environment, using something like a robot is really important. And I think that just the network mapping is going to get better. We're going to get better at understanding what devices are connected to our network, what's still in use, what's not in use. We saw that several years back where computing just became so inexpensive that every developer could just, put a server under their desk, and pretty soon you had this proliferation of servers. And we had to go through and, kind of remediate all of that. And we're at this point now where there's a lot of opportunity out there with edge computing.
Yeah, and I think that's a great note to end it on. That kind of that explosion of and a lot of it's the chips being available, the costs coming down, and now it enables all these use cases. So where security's always catching up with technology's latest sprint off into different directions, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And I have to say, I like your background. I like the castle you have sitting back there. If you use that to kind of like talk about the castle mode example, is that kind of why you have a castle back there?
No, it's there because I haven't finished installing the lights in it. So that is the Lego Hogwarts castle. And it's not easy. It's like building a ship in a bottle, little tiny. I mean, it seemed like a great idea. I got the castle as a gift for one of my kids, and we built it forever ago. But I also got the lighting kit, and the lighting kit is another 600 steps where you go back through, use little tiny pieces of double-sided tape, and you're putting little LED. I'm sure it's going to look amazing once it's done. but I'm only about 200 steps in, and there's a lot of little tiny wires to hide and little tiny LEDs to put in it. No, I don't. It's not there intentionally. It's there because it's not done. One day it will.
Is it an IoT device when you finish with it? Is it an IoT device?
Yeah, I mean they're just LEDs, so it could be. I could attach it to some kind of smart device, and we could have a turn on the Hogwarts lights action. I'm sure. Yeah, one day behind me it will be lit up. And we'll celebrate on that day. And the day after that, it will get off my table and go on a shelf somewhere.
Awesome.
Theresa, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was great talking with all of you.
All right. Make sure you visit securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity to learn more. And also in the show notes today, we have a link to the report that we've been discussing today with Theresa. And we will be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news. So stick around. If your organization is ready to embrace edge computing, we have good news. The 2023 AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report provides everything you need to know to get started. In the report, we identify the common characteristics of edge computing, we found edge use cases are rapidly coming online, and we reveal how to secure edge computing, which is a dynamic, nonlinear, and unconventional approach to computing. Most importantly, you'll learn how to prepare for your edge ecosystem. Get your complimentary copy of the report today. Visit securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. That's securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join us at an upcoming official cybersecurity summit in a city near you. This series of one-day, invitation-only, executive-level conferences are designed to educate senior cyber professionals on the latest threat landscape. We're pleased to offer our listeners $100 off admission when you use code SECWEEK23 to register. Visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity summit to learn more and register today. All right, and now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news, we have Mr. Tyler Shields joining us. How are you doing, Tyler?
Hey, Adrian. Pleasure to see you, as always.
Yeah, we miss you when you're not here. Same with Sean. You and Sean have been in and out a little bit, having fun with stuff.
Yeah,
vacations, summertime.
Exactly. Spend a little time with family.
Nice. Check out securityweekly.com/ESW325 if you want to follow along with us and click all the links we'll be clicking as we discuss the stories today. And there's some interesting financial stuff going on. There was a couple weeks ago, we kind of wish you were here. There was I forget exactly what it was, but there's a situation we could have used Tyler to clarify on.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. But that was then. This is now. Does anybody remember Netcraft? And is surprised to see them pivoting into the security space with $100 million investment?
Yeah, I thought they were the ones that tracked the versions of web servers that were on the internet.
They did. And they still do. But the website looks completely different. And now they're doing cybercrime detection and takedowns and threat intelligence. It's very interesting.
Not to be confused with Minecraft.
Yeah, Netcraft. Well, I think there's another company with a similar name out there, but yeah, I mean, for the longest time they had that ancient looking website, right? Like it looked like it was built in the 90s and they never really updated it. So it was, I remember when this popped up on my radar, I was like, different Netcraft, or is that the same Netcraft we're talking about? But yeah, it's the same one.
Also different than Warcraft.
Very different than Warcraft. The weapons are much smaller. The shields are much smaller.
My liege.
Founded back in 1995.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
That's insane.
I remember when they would point out that IIS servers were vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, they were one of those early organizations that just kind of like told us how big the internet was and told us what was going on with it, and like people would use Netcraft to track. IIS is declining in popularity. Apache's going up, and then Nginx came in. So like everybody, all the journalists and tech journalists would, quote Netcraft's numbers on all those different trends as different technologies came and went. So yeah, I guess it makes sense that they could pretty easily pivot into cybersecurity, with those skills.
Yeah, they claim that they have become the world's largest provider of takedowns, which are delivered as a subscription service to financial services, governments, and corporations.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So getting into like Area 1 would do that. I think Risk IQ would do some of that. You have these like digital reputation services that would help you do takedowns of companies looking to defraud, phish your users, whatever, So OneTrust raised $150 million. They were one of the first to show up on the layoffs tracking that we did last year. If you guys remember that, they laid off almost 1,000 people. I think it was 950. So they looked like they came out of it looking pretty good, I guess. I guess it would be better if they didn't have to raise any money, but yeah, the fact that they can raise 150.
The fact that they can raise it all is pretty impressive. And
right.
My understanding of this particular one is they're only down maybe, I think it was this one, they're only down maybe 15-20% off their high from a valuation standpoint too, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, considering the market. But the valuation is $4.5 billion, but they've raised over $1 billion to date. Ooh. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So how is that ratio? Is that good or bad? Raising $1 billion with a valuation of 4.5? What does that look like to you?
Well, not necessarily all billions in play, right, Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, they burned, right? I don't have the metrics and numbers in front of me to even kind of back into anything with back of the napkin math here, but raising $1 billion means if their most recent round was 150, they've gone through what, 850 of capital since they were founded, right? And the question is that OneTrust was not founded in 1995 like Netcraft, right? So
right.
There's a certain level of burn rate, and they obviously haven't been all that efficient with capital allocation and usage. So, when you're at a 4x valuation on invested capital, it's not a massive return for anybody that's remaining from an equity perspective, right? Usually you want significantly more, 100 in and $1 billion out or more. So.
But what I mean is, some of that capital could have been used to pay off other investors. So I was saying they don't necessarily have 1.1 billion, of fingers in the pot currently, right?
Yeah, it's tough to tell because these announcements intentionally intermingle primary and secondary offerings, which they don't make it abundantly clear to know exactly what capital is coming in from whom and where it's going, and that's intentionally somewhat hidden and obfuscated. So you never really know how much of this was to buy out secondary, how much of it was to buy out ownership of founders, or just straight reallocated capital or directly allocated capital with dilution. It's just tough to know.
Look at I'm just looking at Crunchbase, and man, this was fast and furious. July 2019, Series A, $200 million. Less than a year later, February 2020, $210 million. Later that year, 10 months later, December, $300 million from, I think that one was from, TCV. And then 5 months after that, another $210 million from SoftBank's Vision Fund. We all know how successful the SoftBank Vision Fund was. Wow. Like that's less than 2 years. They raised 400, 600, 900 million, $920 million in less than 24 months.
So even with the market as it was back then, that seems to me, and again, this is more Tyler's bailiwick than mine, but that seems like reckless raising to me. It seems like there was just too much aggression in terms of where they thought they were going to be, that it was almost inevitable that they'd have to lay people off, or that they're probably not spending. Of course, back then, a lot of people didn't spend as conservatively as they have to now, but it just seems like they anticipated being able to do whatever they wanted and didn't even think of a plan B. It's sort of like security. You got to have a backup continuity plan, but it seems like they just probably were betting on the fact that they'd raise a ton of money, grow super quickly, somebody would buy them, and they'd be gazillionaires.
Yeah, it's interesting because according to some quick Google foo, their 2020 revenue was 134.7 million in 2020. So 3 years later, we can presume reasonable growth. They're at a decent revenue number that would dictate valuations that they should be getting, and I'd be willing to bet chunks of that 900 million in that run there had to be some secondary takeout, had to be some non-dilutive buying out previous owners or previous investors or founder equity. It's just tough to know. It's just all merged.
Yeah.
Well, that revenue growth, yeah, great, but in comparison to the debt that they took on, it seems pretty imbalanced.
I don't think any of this is pure debt, though. I think this is all venture, so there's no debt, there's no payback. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, look, if this was $1 billion of venture over 3.5 years, that's a lot of money in, for sure. That's a lot of money in. And you just don't need to take $1 billion in to build a software company anymore. You just don't need it. I don't remember what Wiz took in, but you don't need billions to build a software company, at least not if you're going to build it efficiently. If you just want to shoot for the moon and grab all the market that you can as rapidly and as fast as possible, sure, take the billion, burn hard, and succeed at any cost, right? You're either going to go to the moon or you're going to go to zero. But it's like I said, it's tough to know how much of this was actually operating capital, how much of it was secondary buyout, how much of it was dilutive, and so you just I think yes, they probably didn't need it all. Is the end of the story is they didn't need it all. It was just opportunistic.
Right. All right. Yeah, number 4 looked really interesting to me. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. It looks like a Terraform type thing, but the headline here is Wing Cloud is building an open source unified cloud programming language. So the idea is you can just abstract how you're building stuff in the cloud. Let's see. The Winglang compiler produces a ready-to-deploy package that includes both infrastructure's code definitions for Terraform, CloudFormation, or other cloud provisioning engines. So I guess it's like a meta language for all the stuff that you use to deploy infrastructure. So you can. I thought Terraform was already that. I don't know.
They mentioned Terraform. Yeah, they say the Winglang compiler produces a ready-to-deploy package that includes both infrastructure as code definitions for Terraform, CloudFormation, or other cloud provisioning engines, as well as Node.js code designed to run on compute platforms such as AWS Lambda, Kubernetes, or Edge platforms.
So they're generating code for Terraform, though. So they're a level up above that, I guess. But
they want to connect everything.
It's pretty fascinating. I mean, you can go to they've got one website for the company, another website for the language. So you can go to winlang.io, and they have some examples there. It's a well put together website. So it's kind of fascinating to see. It's almost a little scary how easy they're making it to deploy infrastructure in any cloud, all clouds, all at once.
Something else I want to bring up on this one too. There's a $20 million announcement here, but it's actually, and this is typical marketing trickery, a $15 million seed that closed Q3 of last year, closed almost a year ago, 3 quarters ago, plus a $5 million extension that was closed this past April. So just, there's always that little bit of marketing trickery that you can kind of wrap around some of these. This is really almost a year-old raise.
Yeah, and they're talking about it as if it's one raise, and it's just seed. So that's a lot of money for just seed.
It is a big, healthy seed, and I'm not sure that it's needed here again as well. And time will tell. But their argument is they're trying to build a massive community, with significant adoption. And to build a community does take more capital than a traditional capital efficient business. So, well, they're right. The question is, can they put it to work efficiently and return value?
Yeah. Yeah, interesting stuff. And we've got another one here. Number 5 is clearly a down round, but they're doing everything they can to not call it a down round. So interesting to see how some of these, like I don't think I've seen a raise with a letter on it this year. or maybe for brand new companies, but not for companies who raised in the past, right? Like I've seen a lot of Series A, I've seen a lot of seed, but I don't recall many like B's, C's, or D's or anything like that. Everything is just venture round, because they don't want you to look at it and say, oh, this is like a quarter of what you raised 2 years ago.
Yeah, and nobody wants to say it's an extension round, right? Or they bury it at the bottom of the article like the last one did, that this is technically a $5 million extension round on a raise we did last fall.
Yeah.
Why, though? Why? I mean, I understand trying to make your story the best it can be, but if you think about it for half a second, and it's included in here probably because the lawyers are like, whoa, you can't just outright not tell the truth. But if you think about it for half a second, anybody can figure this out. Like, this is not, the last one was not a seed round. It was really a Series C or B or whichever it was, right? They just called it something different. So does it really make that big of a difference when it comes down to market position, growth, potential clients?
Marketing, Katie. Half of what we do has no logic behind it. It's just it's just what you do. It's just
most actual security buyers, if they're at all technical, think what we do is complete bullshit anyway, so it's all right. But honestly, does it make that much of a difference when it comes to companies who end up with a lot of customers, successful businesses, good products?
I think there's something to be said for basic perception of people and buyers who don't understand investing in investment markets and rounds. And there's a certain, I would say the vast majority don't know the difference between any of these round numbers, don't really know truly what they mean. And so you can mask it, and you can mask the fact that this was an extension on the previous round, an A extension or something. And, they don't think about, oh, you just took another round in. They don't understand the difference. And so I think it's one of those situations where why call out a potential issue if you can bury it and not have people think about it? And anybody who's smart enough to figure it out anyways already knows why you're doing it, so they're not really going to question it. And so, bury it for the masses. That's the kind of scenario here.
I just don't understand why it would be an issue. I mean, I guess that's the real crux of it, is why would it be so bad to say, hey, we raised 100 million last round. This round we only raised 20 million. We didn't need that 100 million. We didn't need 200 million. Why
because
is
you're
that
smart enough to understand some of those nuances, where I think the majority of cybersecurity buyers don't care, right? That's not where they live. That's not where they tend to think. So they just go, whoa, why'd you raise only 20 this time? That's a bad sign. Is your company okay? And even if it's like 1% of the audience that says that, why not bury it? Why not hide it? Right? There's no downside to hiding it. There's only upside.
I guess. I guess the only downside would be. Yeah, the only downside would be people thinking your PR team is sneaky. Yes.
Which we all think that anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah. So, I didn't say the name, but that was Adaptive Shield, who's one of the primary competitors with the company I work for, Valence. So it's good to see investment in the space. There are a ton of new people still coming into that space. So, really helps to show that it's an important market segment, or at least investors think so, right? But yeah, a lot going on in SaaS security these days. Some other interesting ones here. We are well and truly seeing the AI startups start to pop out of stealth with healthy seeds and tackling all kinds of different things because they don't know exactly what to go after. So a lot of these are kind of boil the ocean. Like Cranium AI here, I think they had something like 4.5 million. I didn't get the number in there, but they give you an AI maturity score, based on your AI security posture. So that's interesting. And then there's
hold on, what's an AI security posture?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Am I the only one going, what?
That is, well, I mean, so there's like a LLM AI top 10 OWASP now. So now that and there's other standards out there as well. So now that there's standards that say, here are the best practices, here's what you need to do from a security standpoint to secure your use of AI, we can now give you a score on it, right? We can scan your stuff, detect what you are doing, not doing. Maybe they're actively testing to see, how easy it is to get around your controls on, what you can get I don't even know if this is LLM. I haven't dived in far enough to see if, they're just testing people's, machine learning models or if it's LLM related. I don't even know at this point. But
yeah, go to their website. It does say, they're looking at the infrastructure underneath. They're looking at the model itself. Visualize and map your AI pipelines. So it's kind of layering a pipeline framework on top of it, right? Between your training data, your trained model, and then your input and output into the inference process. I don't understand it. I definitely do not claim to understand it, but there's some interesting architecture here that'd be worth diving into.
And it's interesting they have a compliance story around it. So there's already a NIST AI RMF and EU AI Act.
That seems a little bit premature.
It does, but I've got some reading to do because I'm not really familiar with either of those. So yeah, interesting. Maybe too early, to hit this market, but they're getting funded.
Yeah, they're getting funded for sure. I met with an investor earlier this week, and he said he's chasing down anything AI related right now, anything AI, specifically AI cyber related. And if I know of any interesting AI cybersecurity companies, to let him know. And so these guys are chasing it down. It's active. It's a hot spot. And we know what happens when things get overheated in a particular spot, right? You run a big risk of being the bag holder, left holding that bag of all that late money investment, and things come crashing down around you. And version 2.0, the next wave, is the one that actually has the best riding surf to it. So
exactly. Yeah. All right, and let's see. I thought number 7 was interesting. Is that a normal number of CISOs to be personally investing in like a seed round, something like that?
It is when you have Silicon Valley CISO Investments Group leading the angel round, which is a group of 60 CISOs, Silicon Valley CISOs, that formed an angel investment syndicate and do deals together as a syndicated group. 60 in the group-ish, 30 of them invest, 50% investment. That's not surprising. So really, it's just Silicon Valley CISO Investment Syndicate that invested.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen it advertised like that, like with them actually throwing out the number of early stage investors, like personal individual investors.
Yeah, I read through this, through the press release in detail, and I like GEM. I like GEM Security a lot, actually. But what's interesting is, if you'll notice, they have 3 quotes in the press release. One quote is the co-founder and CEO at GEM Security. The other 2 quotes are former CTO at Atlassian and former CISO at Twilio. So there's no current active CISOs quoted in this particular press release as having invested. And, when you think about the why behind that, as the CISO of a Silicon Valley company or the CTO of a Silicon Valley company, CISO specifically, there's all sorts of potential conflict of interest that get layered in there, right? And so I promise you, the vast majority of them just kept their head below water and said, that's why we invest through that investment group. They make the investments. Maybe we come in as an individual angel. I'm not sure how they run their investments, but yeah, only formers are quoted in the article. So that's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
And actually, that's not true. I did lie a little bit at the current head of security and IT at Postman is referenced in that article. So there is one more in there.
Not a CISO, though.
Nope, head of security. But
close to
they
CISO.
do make mention of CISOs at security executives from McDonald's, Snowflake, Twilio, Atlassian, Ross stores have all chosen to make personal investments in GEM. It's really hard to balance, and I run into this too. I run into it all the time from investments standpoint. It's really hard to balance the ethics side of making an angel investment when you're the decision maker on what security tools you put into your environment. It's hard, right? Because obviously you're naturally incented to go buy those tools you invested in. But I'm sure most of them, if not all of them, make smart decisions and defer if they're invested in a certain thing, defer that to someone else to make a call. But yeah, it's tough to balance for sure.
Yeah. And then not really a fan of the marketing language, the press release here for Cyclops. There's a lot of nonsense in there, but looks like an interesting tool. Looks like they're maybe competing with the Lima Charlies and the Chronicles, Google Chronicles out there. They call it an AI-powered cybersecurity search platform, but it sounds like a SIM,
No, I have a little insight here because one of the co-founders is a former exec from my company. Okay. This is sort of bridging the cybersecurity asset management tools market. That's really what it's aiming to do, but its marketing message is very much geared towards what's cooler and hotter than cybersecurity asset management or CASM. The whole AI-powered thing, based on what I know so far, and this former executive is a great person, so this is no smash on this person, but the whole AI-powered thing is just using LLM, AI to power queries. That's all it is. So it's not an AI tool in any way. Right. The CSMA, okay, you could argue that it's CSMA. But really, when you dig into it, it's cybersecurity asset management or CASM.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I that was the first I had heard CSMA, so that's new to me. And I thought the statement CSMA is similar to Zero Trust, but more mature and advanced. Yeah.
So if you look it up in the new Gartner hype cycle. It is newer than cybersecurity asset management. It is newer than CASM. So it's
more hypey. It has extra hype.
It's newer. It's cooler. Not a bazillion companies are doing it yet. So got to be first and best to the market. The two words that most analysts hate. But yeah, when you look into the tool, it's very similar to my company, Tyler's former company, and about 20 other companies that are currently vying for a position in that market. All right.
Good insight. Thank you for that, because I was unable to beat through the the terminologies they were using. So yeah, new acronym. Yeah, we should have some kind of on-screen graphic every time we have a new.
The hype cycle was just released. The hype cycle was just released. So you can see it all the way on the left. All the way on the left. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to know that if they say it's similar to Zero Trust, that's where you lost me. I was done.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, we need like a hype graphic or something like that. Maybe it's something we can work on. Yeah. All right. Let's see. So PingSafe is an Indian CNAP. Nothing really notable there, except that it's always interesting to see cybersecurity startups that are not U.S. based or not Israeli based. And let me make sure I'm correct there, that it is headquartered.
It was a tiny little seed fund round of $3.3 million.
Yeah. It's financial. The money you need is going to be different. If everybody you're employing is in India, right? It depends on where your teams are. Like I've seen U.S. companies where, the whole tech team is in Pakistan or something like that, and you're like, how are they building all this with that amount of money raised? And there you go. All right, let's see.
Next one's important.
The acquisition. You wanna talk about that one? You pretty familiar with that one?
I'm more than happy to talk about it. It's I hate saying the word Thales, however you pronounce the company.
I thought it was Thales.
Thales, so I got it wrong regardless. All of the above are wrong. Enters the app security market with a $3.6 billion with a B acquisition of Imperva. Take private. Right, take private acquisition. I think it was a take private. Right, Imperva was publicly traded prior.
No. So Thoma Bravo took them private for $2.1 billion, and so they're buying them from Thoma Bravo,
and then sold it off. Right, sold it off afterwards. So, now that's interesting to me. Took them private.
No, it says they're buying it directly from Thoma Bravo.
Yeah, Thoma Bravo sold off the ownership stake to Thales, whatever they are. But what's interesting is think of the numbers. Thoma Bravo bought them for $2.1 billion in 2019.
Oh, yeah.
And then sold them for 3.6. I
got confused there.
Sold them off for 3.6 in 2023. So 4 years return of $1.5 billion in profit in 4 years. Not a bad little turnaround. I imagine they just missed the window of 2022 where they probably could have got 5 or more.
Mm-hmm.
The other interesting thing here is, what do they call it? NFOC, news from other countries. There's a French aerospace and defense group that bought this. So this is actually now going to be owned by a French company that will now own Imperva going forward. Not that it makes any difference to the people that still buy Imperva and like Imperva and use Imperva, but it's another outside of the United States cybersecurity company that's not necessarily located in Israel.
Right. Yeah, definitely more of a trend. We've been seeing that for solid year and a half now, where other countries are popping up more and more with some leadership in security from the vendor side.
Yeah. So that's the NFOC, the news from other countries.
So story number 11 kind of tickled me. The headline particularly, that half of breached organizations are unwilling to increase security spend despite soaring breach costs. And my first thought was like, it's almost as if you can't spend your way out of this problem. Like, what a crazy idea that is, right?
Go figure.
I can't just get more budget, spend more budget, and fix the security problem.
Buy more tools. Just buy more tools. It'll be fine. Buy more tools.
I mean, this is a good realization, but you actually have to do the fixing. You can't just stubbornly refuse to spend more money, say, I'm not doing it, it's not working.
Yeah. But I haven't really dug any deeper into that. I just got kind of triggered by the title and included it there. But yeah, I just think it's a bad take, right? That more losses should equal more spending and more budget, right? Like we should all realize at this point that it's not that simple.
Yeah, I mean, when the cost of a breach is about $4.5 million, they're already spending quite a bit of money in the breach. So what money are they going to have in the immediate 12 months after that for something that they had to spend that they weren't expecting anyway? And then how many of these companies post-breach actually do any kind of hardening or any kind of review of what else is there? I mean, the breach itself is because of a specific thing the attacker discovered, was able to run through that door. And so then they close and lock that door, but are they checking the other doors and windows?
That's
my biggest question is what would you spend it on that would have enough positive impact anyways? Like, seriously, somebody help me answer that question outside of the 4 people that are on this podcast right now. I'd love the audience's participation. Sure, you might be able to get a specific people, process, or tool to solve the specific breach problem that occurred. But where would you spend an additional 30, 40, 50% budget in the event of a breach? Where would you spend it where it has any modicum of efficacy to improve your security stance anyways?
CSMA, clearly.
Clearly.
AI-powered CSMA, obviously. That was not nice. No, but seriously,
I'm going to coin the term. I'm going to coin the term breach
breaches.
avoidance technology, or BAT, and I'm just going to make that a thing now.
Breach avoidance technology.
That's called breach avoidance technology, called BAT, and it's going to be a thing, and it will be the thing that prevents the breach from happening. So there it is.
And it'll be a big physical baseball bat.
Yes, exactly. I have one right here, actually.
Technology break here. Go ahead, Katie. We interrupted.
I have one right
Sean
here. Here's the bat.
Live demo.
Okay.
Live
I
demo.
have the bat right here, and this will protect from breaches.
Sean invents the technology. He joins the angel investor group, and we never see him again.
There's your thumbnail, guys. There's your thumbnail.
No, my
from
comment
YouTube.
was just
Sean wielding a bat.
My comment was just going to be, if you look at all of the major breaches that happen, it's almost always a process. Not the lack of technology, not the lack of a tool. It's almost always a process.
Yeah.
It's the security hygiene. It's the security fundamentals. And I feel like a broken record, but it's not because Company X didn't have a tool like a vast majority of the time. It's because something was missed. I'm not saying that the fundamentals are easy. That's not what I mean.
Right.
But getting more tooling isn't going to solve that. Just like Sean said, if you leave a door open and you just close that door, well, okay, I'm going to come in the window.
It's the fact that those 77 security tools they own are all misconfigured, and none of them are working correctly. They haven't been validated to be working correctly. They don't need half of them. There's overlap between them. Yeah. All right, shall we move on? Let's see. Death of InfoSec Twitter was pretty interesting. So, I mean, it's not a broad analysis. They specifically, so Jay Jacobs specifically used CVEs, discussion about CVEs, which this is very relevant because I worked for a company where we prioritized vulnerabilities for people, and our machine learning model, was partially using Twitter as input on how important a CVE might be to the community, which was a signal that this is potentially either two things: either very overhyped and there's some kind of marketing campaign around the vulnerability, or it's legitimately worrying a bunch of people. So there's a lot of discussion on it. So if that discussion isn't going on Twitter anymore, and you can't get that data now without paying a ton of money, this is actually impacting products. Like, products are going to have to be redesigned. They're not going to be able to use Twitter for threat intel anymore, right? Or for vulnerability intelligence.
Journalists were complaining a few months ago about this same issue.
There isn't.
Yeah, not for security, but in terms of data and trends, social trends, patterns. They were saying, this is going to drastically change how we can understand how society works if we don't have access to this data. So hopefully a new, better platform will arise that can be used in a similar fashion. But this is a huge hit to journalist crowd as well.
So I struggle with this one. Yes, the publicly debated, communicated, discussed CVE data on Twitter is massively trended downward, right, since the new CEO was appointed or whatever. Sure, okay, one data source, but I cannot imagine that that's where the bulk of the early warning detection system of new issues, CVEs, that can't be where the meat of the discussion took place. It just can't be. There has to be back-channel comms patterns. There has to be invite-only groups. There has to be all sorts of other subsystems that exist for those communications.
Sure, but this one was public and accessible.
Yeah, but my point is it's public and accessible.
We don't have access to those.
And probably was garbage to begin with, comparatively speaking to something that may be more high fidelity. Take, for example, my brother. My brother works in vulnerability detection in one of the big fangy companies, and he's invited to all these different private groups and private communications groups, and he's always going to different super spook invite only meeting events, blah blah blah. That's where the bulk of that meat really occurs. And I think any cybersecurity company that's CVE derived, connected, or reports or analyzes, sure, this is one source of data that is now poofed for them. But I think it's one noisy, semi-useless, maybe only useful in validating existence of other communication patterns compared to some of the other communication mechanisms.
Tyler, I really wish you would be more candid and honest with your opinions on this show, especially around the...
I just tell like I see.
Stop holding back.
Well, think about it. This is Twitter. Twitter's so full of garbage, and it has been so full of garbage forever, that I can't imagine the CVE data that was there in the first place had significant value outside of other channels anyways.
I agree. I think it's a data point among many. I think it's unfortunate that it's a data point that gets lost. But I mean, there's things like gray noise that actually track real CVE activity on the internet.
Yeah.
Where you can see what's happening, the sort of impact around certain types of CVEs and vulnerabilities that are network-based.
Very specific types, though, right?
Right. Exactly.
Gray noise is all network and internet. So there's a big chunk of stuff you're not going to see with that data. Yeah.
This
is so for our prioritization, I can't talk specifically about how much this was weighted and how many other things were in there, but yeah, all the regular suspects are in there. If somebody makes a Metasploit module for something, then that's interesting. Exploit DB was just about completely useless until they cleaned it up, and it's actually now fairly useful now that they went through and they cleaned it up, and that's a good sign also if you see exploits for a CVE in Exploit DB. So yeah, there are other sources, but Twitter was always kind of unique when it came to security. And I haven't seen any of the other networks pick that up. Like it used to be a really useful place to go, ask a question, get a wide variety of answers, and to research different things. And I haven't seen it popped up anywhere. I think anywhere else. Like a little bit popped up on Mastodon, a little bit popped up in Threads. But not at the same volume, not with all the same people. I think a lot of people just didn't replace it with anything. They're just not using anything for that anymore. Or maybe they're spending more time in Discords and Slacks. I don't know.
I agree with you 110%, Adrian. I feel like it's definitely the loss of a communication pattern that is useful, for sure. But, IRC died. I can probably come up with 3 or 4 other comms channels that died since I started in this world 25 years ago in cybersecurity. Yeah. Tweeting is going to die, and it's likely dead for cybersecurity, and we're going to move somewhere else. I just may not ever move anywhere else and say the hell with it. I'm tired of chasing it.
This job I have now at the company I'm working for now was probably the first job in over 10 years that didn't come from Twitter, from me knowing people on Twitter, from conversations on Twitter. So really is an end of an era for me too. Twitter was not my resume, but like that's how I built out my network, and how a lot of people know me.
Yeah, I think a lot of that for me, anyways, has moved to LinkedIn now. LinkedIn's kind of become the work version of what Twitter used to be. But sure, I miss the make a comment, get 9 trolling, snarky, funny responses, and 1 useful one pattern too. So
yeah.
So are we saying that Twitter is going away and it's effectively getting X'd out?
Heyo.
Thanks. I'll let myself out.
I don't know. I mean, we can.
I didn't see that coming. I didn't see where that was going.
Yeah, I didn't see that either. That was well played. But I mean, we can make commentary about the stupidity that is Elon Musk in taking a brand that has hit verb status and changing it. You never, like, the dream is to get your brand a verb mode, right? Tissue. Can I please have that tissue? That's a brand, right? Kleenex. Can I have the Kleenex?
Right.
Tweet is a verb.
And just
there's a bunch of brands
tossed it out overnight. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you can't, and he's just like,
with the most.
So what are we going to say now?
With the most generic looking thing ever. Like, I can't even find it when I look through my tabs now. Like, I just look right past the X. Yeah.
Like, every celebrity on the planet was tweeting. Why are you running away from that brand? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's insane. So three more things, including the squirrel story, I wanted to cover here. So regulations, I think everybody at this point has probably seen that the SEC released their final rule on the reporting timeline, the 4-day reporting timeline. So you can now download and read all 186 pages of that. And there's a lot more than just a reporting timeline. There's some other required reporting that's in there as well. So it's worth digging through a bit. I would recommend not reading the 186 pages and instead looking for other people who have summarized it.
Yes, I definitely want the TLDR Cliff Notes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about this is it's been a long time coming. We knew it was coming. The 4-day reporting timeline, let's not get into this given how long we've been talking about the news, because I could talk about it for an hour. Yeah. What's good, what's bad, what should be thrown in the dumpster fire that is also Twitter or X or whatever it is. But there are going to be a whole lot of nuances to this, right? Like, you don't have to have technical details of incidents included in that. That's problematic. Yeah. That's like A1 problematic, right? You have to disclose an incident in air quotes, but after 4 days...
Something happened.
Yeah, something happened. We can't tell you what, because we don't actually know what. We're still talking with the FBI. But this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. There are just so many regulations and requirements and industry recommendations coming at us all to, again, in air quotes, solve the problem of security, because more regulations totally going to do that. This is an interesting one. I think their heart is in the right place. I think it's going to backfire in a lot of situations for a lot of companies and a lot of people, and it probably is going to result in some CISOs getting fired. Just to circle back to our first interview.
One of the interesting things about this is, as Adrian has highlighted or notated in this show notes, is that it says companies must also disclose cybersecurity risk management strategy and governance in annual filings. And I think that's probably one of the most important parts of this. Isn't just, when you're breached or when you have an incident, you've got to disclose it within a certain amount of time. It's really, what is your risk management strategy and how are you actually planning on protecting your environment, which gives
Did we just lose Sean?
Looks like you froze.
That was the most important thing he said all day.
You froze for the last 10 seconds or so, Sean.
No, I blame the kids and the internet. I was saying that companies must disclose cybersecurity risk management strategy and governance in annual filings. And then on top of that, this is the thing that investors will be able to look at, but also looking to make sure there's a plan. What is the plan? How are they protecting? What are they doing in the environment? I think that's even more important than the incident release or notification.
Can the strategy be a BAT, your breach avoidance technology?
It should be. It should be if they're doing a good job. I've got my BAT right here. So if I points to any company that lists the breach avoidance technology in their annual filing.
That'd be a great Easter egg to find.
It's going to be a thing, I promise you.
In a 10K somewhere.
Right. That'd
be great. Yeah, just checking to see if anybody's reading these. So second to last here, the Sphere in Las Vegas. I don't know how I misspelled that there. I assume it was me that misspelled Las Vegas Sphere. But I emailed them.
There was a movie called Las Vegas, actually.
What's that?
There was a movie called Las Vegas. It was about 4 old guys going to Las Vegas for their last hurrah or something.
There you go. Yeah, it was a fun movie.
That's definitely not what I intended there. I'm fixing it now. But
Adrian, what do we think? Is the Sphere going to get popped? Do we even want to talk about what the Sphere is?
Yeah, so the Las Vegas Sphere is this giant, and you can get seats to it for the F1 race. They might be gone. There might still be some seats there. So you would actually be inside the circuit if you get seats in this thing. So it's a venue that's entirely covered in screens, both on the inside and out. So if you're inside this thing, imagine being in at least half of a sphere where everything is a screen. You look up, you look to your left, you look to your right, you look behind you. Everything is you're inside a ball that's made up of screens, and then the outside is also screens. So it lots of pictures and demos of it online of it actually functioning, and it does look kind of amazing. I'm sure it's a bit of an eyesore for people who have to look at it every day. But as far as I can tell, I couldn't find any vulnerability disclosure program, no bug bounty, and with DEF CON descending in a couple of weeks, everybody is talking about like what's the likelihood this thing is going to get hacked, and that's actually number 19, I think, is the survey results from X, X social network. 76.5% say yes, it will get hacked during DEF CON, and I shudder to think the images somebody might post on that screen covered sphere.
Just to give you the idea, this sucker's 366 feet tall and 516 feet wide, and has 1.2 million hockey puck-sized LEDs that can be programmed to flash dynamic imagery on a massive scale. It was fully illuminated for the first time right around the 4th of July. And U2 will use it will be the first first event held in it, will be a massive U2 concert. This thing is absolutely crazy. If it gets hacked, oh my gosh, that is like the most crazy cool hack I've ever seen. And I've been going to DEF CON since DEF CON 6, so I've seen, you name it, I've seen every single thing along the strip hacked at some point, driving in or out of DEF CON over the last 20 years. And I hope like hell this thing gets popped. It'll be amazing.
Somebody wants that cred, that street cred of being the first. I'm not sure I want to see what they do with it if they do manage to pull it off.
I just hope they're hyper creative and do something super interesting to make it worth the while, worth the risk.
And not something worthy of eye bleach or brain bleach or something like that.
No, and definitely no blue screen of death. Don't put a blue screen of death on it, please.
I'm not going to say who or what year, but I did once, when I was doing content for InfoSec World, have a speaker tell me that they hacked the wristbands that you get when you're at Disney to get themselves and their friends, colleagues, family into the park without buying tickets. So
look at that.
Even at more tame conferences, this stuff happens. I can't validate or verify if that actually happens. I'm just passing along what I was told. That person could have been drunk for all I know, but
you know what?
certainly.
You know what would be an absolutely brilliant marketing play? Instead of spending how many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to have your logo on an F1 car, put it on the dome. Put it on that sphere for Black Hat and DEF CON. You know you're going to be in every single trade rag article as being the first cybersecurity company on the dome. Do something interesting on the dome.
You're probably going to get arrested too, though.
No, I'm not talking about hacking it. I'm talking about like actually paying for it instead of paying for the F1 car logo.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was still in the
Yeah, like CrowdStrike.
I'm sure.
How much does CrowdStrike pay to be on an F1 car?
Right. I can't imagine somebody's not going to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they pay those stupid cars to drive around the city. You know, the cars where the back of the car is basically just a giant digital billboard. So of course they're going to try and advertise on it.
Yep. Whoever picks that up for this DEF CON and Black Hat's going to do real well.
So our last post here, our squirrel story, it just seems like a bit of irony. You know, the one of the groups, don't want to make this a blanket statement, but one of the groups that tends to ask for backdoors and things just found out there's a deliberate backdoor in police radio encryption algorithm. So it's just I don't know. It seemed like a bit of irony to me that I don't think it's in any one vendor's implementation. It's in the actual protocol.
Yeah, it's in the standard, the Tetra standard.
Yeah, many different manufacturers make for like the in-car radios, right?
Yeah, this is typically used by radios by Motorola, DAM, Hytera, and others. The standard has been used in radios since the 90s, but the flaws remained unknown because encryption algorithms used in the Tetra system, which is the standard, were kept secret until now. So now that we got our hands on the actual encryption algorithms, we ripped them apart and we're able to find intentional backdoors, which also I think is a positive affirmation for open sourcing things and having vulnerability. People look for vulnerabilities, right? They found one. Now they're going to be able to hopefully remediate it. I mean, I don't know what the cost is going to be to fix all these radios, physical handheld radios. Yeah. That's a whole other problem. But hey, at least we know that the encryption doesn't work.
Yeah, so the researchers are going to present it at Black Hat. So if you want to see that presentation, that will be, I didn't see who the researchers were or if they even mentioned who the researchers were, but Black Hat, they're gonna talk about their findings.
Caleb Mathis, a consultant with Ampere Industrial Security.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I think. I don't know if they're the ones that found it originally or did some work with Wired to uncover more information, but they're mentioned here.
Right. I don't think those are the researchers. Oh, no, it says... here
we go. Midnight Blue.
Yeah, a trio of folks who work for, I assume that's a consulting company in the Netherlands?
Yep, in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a boutique security consultancy. Yep. Midnight Blue. Okay.
And there we go. We got the squirrel imagery and everything to go with it.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. I'm going to be missing DEF CON and Black Hat. Any of you guys going?
I will be there.
I will definitely be there. I'll be there for Black Hat and DEF CON.
Yeah. Sean and I are going to be drinking together. We're going to find a local pub and have a seat.
Not you, Katie?
I'm making the excuse that I have a wedding to plan, 4 weeks from. Yeah. It's a great excuse not to go to Vegas in August.
50% of us will be there.
Absolutely. And if anyone in the audience is going, go to trimarksecurity.com, sign up for our meetup that we'll be having there. I'll be hanging out with some of the Trimark folks, and we'll just hang out and chat and talk all sorts of things, security and squirrel.
Yes.
Yeah, Trimark Security.
I would definitely want to go to that meetup.
Trimarksecurity.com/Vegas-show is where you can go. Very cool. Yeah, I'll miss getting to see a bunch of people. I get asked at least 3, 4, 5 times a day if I'm going, and people wanting to meet up in person there, but not in the cards for me this time.
That's all right.
Thanks so
Hacker
much.
Summer Camp is always an adventure, right?
It is. And we've got a few more shows until then. Security Weekly will be there doing interviews. So we'll, just like RSA, we'll have some content that will be, diverting from the normal show. We'll still do, I think, a news segment every week. But we'll have some of those micro interviews from the show to broadcast around and after the event. So keep an eye out for those. But still a few more normal Security Weeklies before then. All right. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining me today. Katie, Sean, and Tyler. Big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We will see you next week.